Hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to all for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the love and support everyone shares and extends my way. From the heart, I appreciate every one of you. Also, do please like, share, subscribe, and hype the video. Well, everyone, the topic I want to touch on today is what I've been asked all day about, right? And it has to do with the reaction. You guys seen it on the thumbnail, the cover that someone did on Sherm. You know, I had already mentioned I don't want to give this individual no type of cloud. My respects to his audience, but it's just my personal feeling, right? But anyways, this is about Sherm. You know, after I was directed over there, I went and I seen what was said about him. And to be sincere, far from the truth. At the end of the day, it's what I always talk to. At least the people that watch me or hear my story on the sense of be smart, them ways never go away. There's an agenda there and you can see it from far away. For example, I know for a fact, you know, that individual that put out that video on Sherm, he was never, not even close to the ankles as what Sherm was at one point. Yes, I agree. At one point, Sherm was real outspoken, you know, but he was on every yard, even on the streets. You know, the person that's talking, his agenda is to minimize his wiggle out, right? And by throwing dirt on a lot of people, I give him that, on Bobble, and it was a shame. And but this, I disagree completely, you know, and not just counting on how he went out, right? We're talking about in the years of activities to say Sherman was his own man. This was a time of politicking, straight up. Everybody was after a yard and they were warring with each other. And Sherman was everywhere. There is a big reason this individual don't talk about why he tried to fit in with the Cuata faction, like stabbing Indio, Tupi, or doing Tupi's dirty work. And then he tried to sideline with the D facility, then with Topo Peters, where he did a lot of people wrong, right? Also, you know, when you ask for my reaction, I'm gonna be honest, me having personal run-ins, I could tell you, Sherm, he definitely held that power, man, up there. Ed was different, and I even disagree with that, right? I haven't watched the full video, but I skipped around and Sam status, it's a hard place to be. You're not gonna be able to excuse me, you're not gonna be able to function from there. Period. Point blank. It don't matter how much juice you got. And the facts are that Sherman may never get out of there because of his movement, of the wiggles he carried, right? With the people with him. That he was strict, outspoken, yeah. But I pay attention to words, especially if I know an individual has an agenda and I know the individual, right? For example, the individual put out that video on Sherm, wishes he had the ability of Sherm in the Bay. Remember, nobody politicked against Sherm in the Bay. He held his own. You seen Waters faction, Tupi's faction, Topi Peter's faction. You heard of many bumping heads, right? Did you hear about Sherm bumping heads with anybody? You can't have it both ways. What this individual fails to tell everyone is that in his Water Sherm's indictment, I was already up in the Bay, and this fool had been long gone, right? He There was over 20 Pilis, members, señores, that got pulled out without counting the camaradas. Who was the main individual on the stand telling to give life to all these individuals in the Fed? This person with an agenda speaking out, right? I find it funny. He speaks out about that oversaw him. You know, I guess it's hard to face that some individuals don't have that same fear you carry. I said it again, my personal agenda is because I seen how he went down the line hurting and telling, even when it was all lies. Besides giving up all the pipelines of communication, even the individuals that worked for him, that he knew they had something holding for him, he still gave them up. It was that bad his agenda to get out of prison. You see, I haven't met one action that's Christian, so I said, not just campolero, but as a Christian, of course, there's offense there, because his agenda right now is to work, gente, to minimize his actions. And I know, first and foremost, you guys ask me, I never been nobody, never was, never will be, right? But, I was at least a fly on the wall when things were occurring. You know, every time you guys send me to go look at something from this cat, the only thing I see is, oh, I testified against him in this trial. Oh, I was called. Oh, I got pulled out here to testify. And that's something proudful. You see, why don't you tell them they don't have nothing on you because there was never nothing to put on you. You see, you were just that one individual that, oh, cuate, costea so and so, was doing, or on the Chuys Falas. But what were you doing? For real, what were you doing? I know you say you were doing a lot, but besides being orders from somebody else, I haven't heard nothing through my 23 years, 11 months, 14 in the shoe. I haven't heard not one story that you were doing something on your own. That's why Topo Pio Pio died in 98, and by 2002, your own brother, Carnal, from your neighborhood, tried to take you out. You paint a good narrative, but, you know, you come on here wanting to fool people saying you're a Christian so that they believe you speak the truth. Speak the truth. Facts are facts. You talk about facts. He oversaw you, however you want to call him, paisa or whatever you want to disrespect an ass. He's still there. You put out this full narrative of him now as many. But again, I seen, every time I mention something about this individual in our lives, he does damage control. So as I'm recording this, I want to put it out for everyone to see in the hopes, you don't do damage control in that sense. Jealousy is, uh, but any man that comes on here and say I'm a changed man and still has the same ego and pride is definitely full of, you guys know, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but besides reacting from all the Federico's point of view, he literally was the one that put him away. And he has his own narrative about things, right? It's a shame, Let me tell you something. When Weddle Sherm did that interview, he had other carnales authorize it. Now, this individual, if you don't have an agenda, answer me this. How is it possible to be in two places at once? In his own video, he says, I'm in my cell laughing at Weddle Sherm because he was exposing the organization like this, okay? And then right away you say you were directing the squad, put a camera in them committee meetings with the IGI squad. Which one is it? Or is it the way I've always thought, that you were in the cuts collecting information for a very long time, speaking already with the uniform and was ready to bounce. But again, that's to be expected because from your own mouth, the minute you got blessed, you were ready to bounce and call it a quit. Again, I can respect all his audience, everyone. I respect it to fullest. You know, I understand there's people that don't respect the wiggle of prison. That's fine. But how about them charges? I haven't heard him speak about it one time. Where's the Christian? Where's the honesty? And again, I'm doing this for my friends that are with me and have been with me on this channel that requested me to touch on this. It's real easy to see an agenda. I can tell you firsthand. Well, there's no needs to put names because they're still doing their thing, but they were real happy they had a couple years to the house. All of a sudden, they get pulled out and a false charge on them by you know who. That's not being truthful. But anyways, it ain't about truth. The fact is, he's right about Sherm being, like to have MA. He was proud of what he was. And let it be known. I know you guys had to hide it from the popo. It ain't like they didn't know who each one of you was, right? Out there. But then again, it goes to the ignorance, right? And then this is individual speaking ill because the MA tattoos on Sherm in the drawings that had a mariposa on his neck and a big black hand with MA on his chest. Make that make sense. But again, I know you're on here and since you called it quits, you had an agenda and that's to paint you as hierarchy. Hierarchy of what? Again, I didn't hear not one thing. He says you stepping on toes, politicking with Oppo, with somebody else that had more juice, right? That's why when they were all gone, you knew what was coming. And you tucked your tail, right? But here you are with another agenda. 2 years ago, someone asked me, hey, what about this cat right here? You know, he's the most famous rat known publicly. And he told me everything he does gonna do you to. I told him, hell yeah, that fool has an ego and a pride that he needs the attention. I think you found your papita, right? Which, well, I don't respect it. Again, my respects to your public. This is for the family on this channel that asked me, right? I hope it's to your liking. And sorry, I'm not gonna sugarcoat or beat around the bush. On my personal experience, this cat was always a follower. The time where he was doing his thing on the street, look at what he did. Just look at it. I don't need to tell you, everything's there. That's the reason I'm not mentioning him no more. You know, I'm using a public picture because, again, he's the most famous snitch. He's been on the internet since he went weenie. And I don't want to mention his name, his channel, especially, you know. And there's not, there's nothing. He said it real quick, you know. Whoever utilizes anything on his channel is going to rat you out. Can't do it though when all you're doing is doing something. You're using an image as public, you know, and you're not mentioning him. But everybody knows who I'm speaking on. But then again, everyone, those who have been me from the start know I don't like to do this, especially with someone I don't like, because my mind tends to want to pull me to say things the way I should say them. But you know, I respect everyone too much. So I'll react to anything you want me to react, but I really don't want to speak about this individual no more. But that other individual you guys keep asking me of, the 805, I said something in the last video, you know, and he's kept, at least to my knowledge, what I asked, so I'm gonna do the same. Palabra overall. But again, everyone, this just cautionary tale. Be trucha. When I speak the gatos, remember I speak of a mentality. You can see that mentality don't leave even when they drop out. Buenas noches, everyone. Please stay true to yourself and all your loved ones.